Hey guys, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to MBBS Treasure Channel. Today we are going to read about topic number 2 of pathomorphology, that is cell injury and types of cell injury like irreversible and reversible cell injury. So in today's topic, today we are going to read about what is this normal cells activity, then what is cell injury, then what are the causes of cell injury, then cellular adaptation to injury, then what are the mechanisms of cell injury, then lastly reversible and irreversible cell injury. So let's start our today's topic. Cell injury. What do you mean by a normal cell? Physiologically, a normal cell means the cell that tries to maintain its homeostasis. And homeostasis means if there will be any kind of change in the external environment, the cell will not be affected through that external changes. And it will always try to maintain the homeostasis. How the cell maintains its homeostasis? By constant supply of metabolic energy, that is ATP, and through the active transport process. In active transport process, the cell usually knows that what material should be imported or what material should be exported from the cell and to the cell, that the cell will be called as normal cell. Then what happens if a pathological stimuli will be acting upon a cell? If this is a cell and if a pathological stimuli will be acting on this cell, and that will lead to change in the normal metabolic activities. The cell cannot perform this action, or the cell will be deprived of the metabolic energy, or will not be getting the enough amount of ATP or energy, or they cannot perform active transport process, that will lead to the injury of the cell. So now we can define what is a cell injury. So it is a pathological condition in which the cell suffers from external or internal environment and there will be a change in the metabolic activity, or we can say any agent affecting the cell can cause the cell injury. Okay, so now we know in a gross manner that what is a normal cell's activity and when the cell will get affected and what is a cell injury. For affecting the cell, there are certain kinds of causes. So under that causes, it will be called as stimuli or pathological stimuli. There can be many kind of causes like due to lack of oxygen. Then second one is physical agents, chemical agents, biological, infectious agents, then immunologic reactions, then genetic dearrangements, and then nutritional imbalances. First of all, the lack of oxygen. Oxygen is very much important for a cell to perform all kind of its metabolic activities. If the cell cannot get the needed amount of oxygen inside the cell, there will be less cellular activity inside the cell, the organelles properly cannot function, and finally there can be necrosis or apoptosis, or it can cause cell death. So the lack of oxygen condition is known as hypoxic condition. This hypoxic condition also can be cause for cellular injury. Then is the physical agents. Obviously, physical agents means outer surrounding things that can affect the cell, like temperature, external temperature, then atmospheric pressure, then electric shocks or radiation, then mechanical trauma that can affect the cell. In chemical agents, in our day-to-day lives, the drugs we use or the foods we eat, it contains some kind of chemicals. So in chemical agents, it may be our therapeutic drugs, aesthetic drugs, alcoholic drugs, then insecticides or herbicides that are present in our food particles. Then comes the immunologic reaction. In immunologic reaction, our body has antigen antibody reactions occurring every time because our own body produces antibodies against the antigens. So anaphylactic reactions comes under it. Anaphylactic means the allergic reactions that are occurring in our body. The allergic reactions are autoimmune disorder. Disorder means the immune reactions that are occurring in our body for protecting us from the environmental antigens also may be a reason for causing the cell injury. Also, the antibodies that are produced may also sometime can affect the cell, causing this immunological reaction as a cause. Then comes the genetic dearrangement. What do you mean by genetic dearrangement? From the word we know, genetic means containing the hereditary information, and where that hereditary information is present inside the nucleus. And what are the structures that are present inside the nucleus? The DNA or RNA's material. If structurally they will be violated, the structures of or the change in DNA RNA nucleus also may cause some kind of problems in cell, and that will also lead to change in normal metabolic activity. Then finally comes the nutritional imbalances. Nutritional imbalances means in our day-to-day life, whatever the food we are taking or whatever the intake of our food content, that matters. Like if there will be change in the protein content of our food, protein, vitamin or lipids, fats, anything, any content will be violated, then that can affect the organ, further organ to tissue, then tissue to cell. So finally we are reaching at cell injury. Okay, so these are the normal causes or important causes that we can draw, that these are the conditions that can affect a cell. The next question arises, if there will be a cell injury or the pathological stimuli is acting on a cell, then how the cell will change its normal activity. The change in normal activity in response to the pathological stimuli is known as adaptation. So the next question comes here is that cellular adaptation. What do you mean by cellular adaptation? The change according to the pathological stimuli that will be occurring inside the cell is known as adaptation. It can be of three types. It can be like increase of cellular activity, then decrease of cellular activity, and third one is if there will be change in cell morphology. Under increasing of cellular activity, there are certain terms that we will discuss, like what do you mean by hypertrophy? Hypertrophy means there will be increase in the volume of cell. There will be increase in size of the cell because of increase or enlargement of the cellular organelles. Then what do you mean by hyperplasia? Hyperplasia means there will be increase in number of cells, but there will not be any kind of increase in the size of the cells. Only there will be increase in number of cell. Then comes the decrease of cellular activity. When the cellular activity decreases due to the pathological stimuli, there it is called as atrophy. In atrophy, the size of the cell decreases, and this will be occurring after natural growth. But one important thing comes here, that here also comes the hypoplasia. In hypoplasia, there will be decrease of size, but before natural growth, before attaining the natural growth, if there will be decrease in size, it will be called as hypoplasia, and after natural growth, if the cell will decreases its size, then it is called as atrophy. Then comes the change in cell morphology. If there will be certain kind of change or abnormal development in the cell morphology, it will be called as like dysplasia and metaplasia. So next comes here is the mechanism of cell injury. It means what are the mechanisms through which the cell gets injured or lesion or it is destroyed. There are 6 kinds of mechanisms under which the cell get injured, like infiltration, decomposition, disturbed synthesis, then transformation, then ATP depletion, then damage to the DNA. In infiltration, what happens if there will be poor kind of filtration or permeability of certain kind of materials or proteins, lipids or fat that in future get accumulated to cause certain kind of disease or convulsions that will be a part of cell injury. Then decomposition. In decomposition, if certain kind of materials or through these mechanisms, what happens? The cellular structure will get directly affected and the cell structure will get destroyed. Then the disturbed synthesis. In disturbed synthesis inside a cell, if there will be increase of synthesis or decrease of synthesis of a particular kind of materials and that is not normally produced in a proper manner, then it will be causing a disturbed synthesis. According to the word, we can understand not produced normally inside a cell. Then comes the transformation. What do I mean by transformation? It's important because in transformation there will be only one type of primary substances, but from the primary substances there will be more and more secondary substances through the reaction of primary substances. For example, if there is glucose present inside our body, then there will be number of more polymerization reactions taking place in our body for the formation of glycogen. Okay, then is the ATP depletion. ATP depletion means when the cell doesn't get enough amount of oxygen for the metabolic processes, then this condition is known as hypoxia, means less oxygen amount in the blood. Then ischemia is a reason in which there will be less amount of blood supply to the organ and through which there will be decrease in energy binding works inside the cell. So the energy binding works or the one that requires the ATP cannot be performed, that will be resulting due to the ATP depletion and finally causing the cell injury. Then damage to DNA, like the DNA, we know genetic material. So if there will be certain kind of damage to the nucleus, it will be called as a mechanism of cell injury as damage to DNA. Okay, then comes the mechanism of cell injury we have discussed. Then comes in a gross total thing. We know now that what is a cell injury, and now we will read about reversible and irreversible cell injury. This is a normal cell. If there will be pathological stimuli acting on this cell, then the normal cell will be converted to a cell injury. There will be certain kind of changes in the metabolic activities of the cell causing this cell injury. The cell injury are of two types. First one is reversible and the second one is irreversible type of cell injury. The reversibility is called because if the injury will be occurring inside the cell, after the injury also the cell can come back or revert back again to normal cell activity condition or normal physiological cell activity condition. Irreversible means it will not be possible to revert back or come back to normal cells condition. That is why it is called as irreversible. In reversible, the reason may be intracellular accumulation and extracellular accumulation of lipid, carbohydrates, and proteins. This the intracellular and extracellular accumulation also contributes to irreversible type of cell injury when the accumulation of these compounds in intracellular and extracellular will be for a long period of time and the lesion will continue or the injury will continue for a long period of time, then the reversible will be converted into irreversible type of cell injury. And once the cell attains the irreversible type of cell injury, then further it cannot get back into normal cell condition. So the result will be cell death. And the cell death are two types: necrosis condition and apoptosis condition. Apoptosis condition is called as a programmed cell death, and necrosis is known as aprogrammed cell death. It is known as aprogrammed and it is known as programmed cell death. It means the cell knows that the cell has to die, so it will be programming its own death. So it is known as apoptosis. And if there is no reason that the cell does not know that it's going to die, then the condition is known as necrosis condition. Okay.